Last time on Knot Rod, we left you suspended on an epic cliffhanger with a single burnout and a blown tire. And now you get to find out what happened. And it's probably not as good as your imagination, but we're gonna top it off with burnouts and drag racing. After we put the car together, it developed a rather substantial leak between the oil pan and the timing chain cover. In fact, it's a steady stream coming out of there with the engine idling. And there's no way they're going to let this thing go down the track with that big of a leak. In fact, they probably won't want to go down the track without the leak, but why shoot ourselves in the foot even more here? The pan doesn't seem to leak anywhere else yet, so I am going to attempt to do this completely the wrong way and drop the pan as much as I can and try to put this new front seal in and smear it with a whole bunch of silicone on the top and bottom. And normally I'd feel really bad about doing it this way because it is completely the wrong way to do it, but the alternative means pulling the engine in order to do it right. And if this works, that means not pulling the engine. If it doesn't work, then I'll just have to pull the engine like I was already going to have to anyway. Okay, so I'm actually pretty excited here because I pulled the old front gasket out, and the top of it looks like it was sealing up just fine because it's completely dry. The bottom, however, was all wet, and what it looks like comparing the old seal to the new one is that where the pan seats on this seal, it crushes and makes a little indentation, and that's what puts enough pressure on this gasket to actually seal it up. The new one you can see is just completely flat. The old one, this indentation has kind of got a memory to it now. And since this was actually done properly the last time it was taken off, which is to not smear this with silicone, to just put it up here on the corners and then allow the pressure of the pan to seal it, I don't think I'm going to do what I said I was going to do by smearing this with silicone. I think I'm just going to slap it up in there, put some RTV on the corners like you're supposed to, and then hopefully the pan, when it pushes into this like it did into this one, should seal up just fine. So we're going to see how that works. And the rest of the gasket had never been RTV'd either, and it doesn't leak, so I'm pretty excited about this. I think this might actually work. You may have noticed the spacer I installed when I put the Holly on. Now the reason I'm pulling the spacer off is because it's kind of making it act like a cross between a single plane and a dual plane intake manifold, and so it's kind of just getting the worst of both worlds because it's not getting a very good signal to the carburetor, so I think it's getting a lean stumble. And I could fix that just by increasing the jet size and stuff like that, but the other thing is this car has like a 273-to-1 rear gear, so I think by lowering the carburetor down closer to the manifold I might be able to get a little more low-end grunt out of the engine to help to push those taller gears. I also installed an oxygen sensor so I can monitor the air-fuel ratio, and while I did that I installed a makeshift exhaust system because if you mount the O2 sensor in the collector with open headers, free air can actually get pulled back into the collector far enough to throw off the readings, especially with a long duration cam, which I have in this. This is way too good of a muffler for this car, but it's going in here anyway. This is kind of a neat trick if you want to clamp a piece of exhaust pipe, but you don't want to deform it in the vise. Okay, so this stuff is all installed extremely poorly. I've got zip ties holding the air-fuel gauge on to the steering column. These may look like zip ties on the little computer thingy, But they're not. They are actually twist ties. Yes, that's right. We have resorted to using twist ties because we ran out of zip ties. So here we go. We're going to try it and see how the oxygen sensor works. I'd like to say that the way this is all installed is only temporary, but you know how that goes. Yep. And that is what happens, my friends, when you go and do a bunch of burnouts and go really fast on old, dry rotted tires. Don't do it. Don't be like me, don't be stupid. But it was really fun while it lasted. So we're just gonna limp it back here. I think there's enough tire there to do that. So for those of you that aren't aware of how things work in the Pacific Northwest, basically all the drag strips are closed down between September and March. So since we didn't make it the last time, we really had to wait that whole time until now when we can actually make it to the first test and tune of the year. During that time though, I decided to take care of a few things. The most obvious is the car is black now. It has an epoxy primer paint job just so I'm not crapping myself every time there's clouds overhead and the car is outside. We also put some drag slicks on the back. We got skinnies up front, and to give the illusion that we thought about safety to the tech inspectors, we plumbed all hardline on the pressure side of the fuel pump all the way up to the carburetor. And this is actually pretty neat. What you do is you get a fuel filter for a 2001 Silverado, and that way this is designed for high pressure fuel injection, so it's all welded construction and it's pretty tough. It shouldn't leak or anything like that. And then you get This fitting, it's weatherhead part number 1446, which converts the metric threads on that fuel filter to the 5/8 flare fittings that virtually all old American V8s use on the fuel system. And the cool thing is, whenever I gotta replace the filter, all I gotta do is walk into any local auto parts store and just grab a filter for a 2001 Silverado. Boom. So, without further delay, we are gonna go to the drag strip. It still has two 7.3-to-1 rear gears, which are terrible for drag racing, but we're gonna do it anyway and probably fail miserably, all for your entertainment. Truth be told, we'd been having a ton of trouble getting the car to run right under wide open throttle. The whole thing became so repetitive and tedious that I didn't even film it. I came to the conclusion that I fried something in the distributor by running an externally regulated alternator without a regulator. So we changed out the alternator and distributor, changed plugs multiple times, changed plug wires, added ground wires, added a 12-gauge wire going directly from the battery through a 30-amp relay to the distributor, made some jetting changes, and every change made a small improvement, but nothing got it perfect at wide open throttle. And no matter what, I couldn't get the air-fuel ratio leaner than about 10.5-to-1 at wide open throttle. Then, just before we loaded it on the trailer, we noticed the secondary float bowl was leaking fuel through the secondary butterfly. Upon further inspection, we noticed a bunch of milky, watery oil coming from the breather tube, so my mind started gravitating toward the blown head gasket. But we didn't have time for that, and I wasn't going to wait any longer. So I put a new needle and seat in the secondary float bowl and set the float level, but unfortunately just didn't have enough time to make a pass on the road to make sure my float adjustment was good. It was getting late and we had to hit the road. So the next time this thing would be tested at wide open throttle would be on the racetrack. Okay, so I just made it through tech inspection, miraculously. Unfortunately, the tech inspector made me get rid of all of my cameras here, so unfortunately we're down to about 2 camera views for this actual race, but it is what it is. Not gonna lie, I am quite a bit more nervous than I expected I would be. And let's summarize. I have an old tired bottom end engine with performance heads, which may or may not have a blown head gasket, a 3-speed manual transmission, and 2 7.3 gears in the back, which are going to suck for what we're about to do. This is going to be brilliant. All right, Ryan, remember your training? Oh, Ryan, you haven't had any training. Oh yeah, I forgot.
reaction time is all so.
Thank you.
1501. Did you see that?
I know. I was telling Sarah too. I was like, he's gonna be in the 15s. I can feel it.
Dude, that thing ran perfect.
Did it?
It wasn't even a problem. Like it sat there right at the mid 12-to-1 air fuel ratio.
Oh yeah.
Just perfect.
Well, that was the problem.
Not a miss or hesitation or anything.
Yeah?
It was perfect. 1501, I can't believe my very first run. I mean, it's not fast, but it's respectable.
Yeah, that ain't bad at all.
You can tell those gears are super tall. Did you see how it launched?
God.
Whoa!
I could just, I can almost smell the clutch smoking.
Did it even do a burnout?
Oh yeah, it did a good burnout. I think I
Sweet.
just need a little more umph.
Just lay into it a little bit more. I was worried I was smoking the clutch.
No, they were smoking.
I thought I'd be lucky to like be under 20. So this is like awesome for me.
What was the speed? I didn't see.
96.13. Man, if we put like 373s or 411s or something in there,
Oh yeah.
that sucker'd move. And my reaction time was hella slow. I didn't even take off until the light was green. You're supposed to take off on the final red or final yellow or whatever the hell it was. I don't even remember. I'm stoked. I want to do this again. That was a ton of fun.
Was it?
Yeah. Man, I gotta say, this was a hell of a journey. Listen, I am well aware of the fact that 15 seconds is not a fast quarter-mile time, so a lot of you may call it a fail, and I get that. But we took a rotting chassis, built a whole car in 30 days, mostly from parts we already had lying around, ran it down the drag strip for my first time ever, and laid down a 1501. And ultimately, in life, if you want to eventually win, you've got to be willing to lose, because you've got to start somewhere, and that somewhere is normally in a position many others have already crossed. In context, I'll call what we did a win any day. And someday, when the Nova gets lower gears, we'll be back. And someday after that, when it gets an all-aluminum big block, we'll be back yet again. And when that happens, you'll see it all right here on Not Rod Shop.
You gotta have your trunk open or something?
Oh, probably. Guess I'll open it then. Looks like that's what everybody else is doing, so.
Hard.
So this is my first time. I have no idea how this works.
Fill it out.
Okay. You got a pen?
I do, but it's mine.
Sears? Who's got a pen?
Yeah. Are you supposed to mark the windows?
Okay. That's all got to come off the windshield.
Okay.
Note of that back in the back. Okay, sign it here at the bottom. Okay.
I thought I signed it after I inspected it.
You know about the other wristband. That one paid your money. I need to know to send the body at the end of the day. That's where you want to go.
Okay.
Go over there and get a restricted band.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeez, we're really learning today.
Yeah, you should have had him right. I'm new on the windshield with that pen of his. And the cool thing is, if I ever got to replace the filter, not if, because it's going to be when. And the cool thing is, whenever I got to replace the filter, with the sensor disconnected, apply power to the LC2. When power is applied, the status light will light up green for 2 seconds while the controller initializes. The status light will then turn red and flash a 2-blink sequence indicating an error 2 condition. This error state indicates that no sensor is detected. You can smell that race fuel. It smells like candy. Wonder what it tastes like.
Probably delicious.
Tastes like cookies.